name is Andres Marquez, and I lead the digital marketing portfolio here at Dun Bradstreet. And today, I'm delighted to have Alex Southworth join us. Alex is the VP of Account-Based Marketing here at DMB. So, how are you today, Alex?
I'm very good. Great to speak to you, Andres.
Wonderful. So, pretty much, we're seeing that ABM adoption is rapidly increasing. In my opinion, we've seen based off of some analysts that pretty much is going to be the only way to do B2B marketing moving forward in a very short term. So I know you work with our clients on a daily basis, helping them accelerate marketing impact with ABM. And I think we've learned that ABM is definitely a journey and that trying to do it all at once probably is just going to slow the process and also the impact that you can provide within the organization. And I think this is a major challenge you, Alex, see a lot within different type of companies. And again, I've seen that you've been presenting this scroll background framework. So based on your experience, can you share your thoughts around what people should focus on each stage of the ABM journey?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Andres, and it's something that I actually see a lot of our clients struggling with. And what I tend to do actually with a lot of our clients is initially the first thing that I do is I actually help them define what exactly they mean by account-based marketing. You know, I think ABM or account-based marketing is a very trendy term at the moment. And if you talk to lots of different analysts, there are lots of different approaches to how you should think about it based on what their function is. But I think really defining what ABM means for you is actually really important. Is it more of a content play? Is it more of an execution play? And then it's also specifically what your objectives are. So I think being really crisp around whether you want to use ABM to focus on prospecting or whether you want to use it to drive cross-sell, upsell, or renewals, or maybe even pipeline acceleration is really important. And so working with clients really to define what ABM means for them, for me, is really the first step, and it's fundamental. And then once you have that nailed down, then you have a framework upon which you can start thinking about how you scale. And everyone's journey is going to be a bit different, but understanding that, for me, is the foundational element that leads you to all the other steps.
Okay, no, so it sounds definitely makes sense. So probably for those who are just like getting started or looking to probably make their ABM efforts a little bit more precise or just like scalable, I don't know if you can just go a little bit more in depth in terms of like what are just like some practices that people can take around when they're in the work phase. What's probably more recommendable when they're just like going into the work and when they're just like more be a more seasoned person on their ABM practice. What's like the wrong
Good
phase
question.
look like for them?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and I think the start phase for me is really the crawl phase for me is all around thinking about what's the minimum viable campaign, ABM campaign that you can run to start proving the use case. So typically the way I think about it is, I think about it in terms of who are you targeting, how are you targeting, and then ultimately how are you measuring. Those are the three components that I think are persistent across all of the different levels. And so in terms of like who you're targeting, often it's a fixed list of accounts. It's not a dynamic list. You work with sales to align on which are the top, let's say 1,000 accounts that you want to target, and you start off with that. Again, it's important to define what the objective is for those accounts, whether it's pipeline acceleration or whether it's prospecting and just getting them to come to your website and fill out lead forms or something like that. But that's the first thing. The second thing is the channels that you want to activate. What marketing channels? How do you want to reach those prospective customers? My opinion is often the net new tactic, the one with often the biggest incremental uplift is actually programmatic advertising. And so often it's about how can you leverage programmatic to better drive your objectives. So fixed list of accounts, leveraging programmatic for a specific objective. And then the key thing, the other thing that I think is absolutely essential is measurement. You have to have a mechanism by which you measure the impact and the results of what you're doing. If you forget that step, then you'll never get to the walk phase. So as I think about crawl, that's what I think are essential. And then as you start moving to walk and then eventually running, it's all about scaling that up, so becoming a bit more sophisticated in terms of how you build your target audiences and your segments, moving away from just doing programmatic to doing more tactics and becoming more sophisticated in terms of your touch points with your customers. So, for example, you could do remarketing, you could leverage social media, you could start doing integrated campaigns with, let's say, SDR or even email follow-up and coordinating that. And then, also in parallel, just becoming a bit more sophisticated in terms of what you measure. For me, what you measure at that next phase is more around the diagnostics. You become more sophisticated around understanding the diagnostic metrics around your campaigns and thinking about how you can improve. So at a high level, that's how I think about the overall framework.
No, absolutely. And one of the topics or hot topics we're seeing right now in the industry is just intent. So probably my question to you is, what are the use cases, or how come people can combine their ABM efforts with intent? And probably if you would recommend leveraging intent in a specific stage of the RBM journey.
That's a really good question, because I think intent in the industry gets miscategorized in much the same way actually as ABM, account-based marketing, gets miscategorized and gets converted into a lot of different things. I think, again, it goes back to what's your objective? What are you trying to achieve from your account-based marketing program? And the way I think about intent and the way I think about it holistically is what you're trying to do is you're trying to get some data, some information about where the customer, the prospect is on their buying journey. Okay. For me, you have lots of different types of signals that indicate that. At the very early stage, if you think about a customer journey, often they're learning and researching about a specific topic. Okay, that's important. But then you also need to understand when they're engaging across the customer journey, when they're starting to reach out and learn more about specific solutions, and when they start getting into the shopping phase as well. So as I think about intent, and specifically third-party intent, I think about that as being a signal that is that allows you to identify if someone is right at the beginning of their phase, if they're starting that research on other topics. And as a result of that, I think the way to think about that in terms of how you use it is really around prospecting. So it's people you haven't engaged with that are unqualified. You target them, you bring them to your website, you see what content they then engage with on your website. And then that actually gives you more metrics around engagement. So intent for me is very, very top of the funnel. It's all about prospecting. But then the key thing is, as you think about intent, you need to start thinking about it more holistically, about being more of an engagement metric. And then you need to start thinking about what other data have you got within your telemetry data that allows you to determine whether a company or a customer is becoming more engaged. And then that further drives your customer journey that you're promoting.
No, absolutely. That makes total sense. Probably my last question to you, or just like a comment. I think I noticed that most of the people we tend to work with are just like customers where we just like showcase their stories. They typically tend to be more in the work phase. That's like where I believe most of the people are right now. So what are the key plays you would recommend for those who are already doing ABM, who are probably just like leveraging different channels and trying to get more sophisticated with their segments? What would be your like recommendation or key plays they could start thinking of, just like to accelerate their path through their IBM journey?
For me, I think about it in a very systematic way. Okay, so it's all about thinking about your objectives and what objectives, how do you want to extend your objectives? Okay, and then think about how do you want to systematically get better at achieving your objectives. Those are the two things that you really need to focus on as you start thinking about scaling. So depending on what objectives you're doing, so if you're focusing on prospecting and driving awareness, can you extend that to being to pipeline acceleration or cross-sell, upsell opportunities? A lot of it depends on the company and the type of what their buying cycle is, what their products are, and what the nuance is around what they're doing in terms of what the best next step is in terms of where they scale. But thinking about that, that's how I think about it. So it's how can they extend their objectives? How can they scale to different objectives? And then how can they systematically get better at being more effective at achieving those objectives? Kind of conceptual answer, but for me, that's how I think about it.
No, that's great. That's great, Alex. So definitely, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you here, and absolutely, I appreciate your time.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Andres. Really appreciated the time with you today.